good evening, and welcome to Sky Night. The full moon is rising at sunset and lighting the sky all night long. It is currently 98% illuminated and located in Capricornus. Please enable captions in your language to see local observing cities and times. Join me now for a guided tour of the entire celestial sphere as we map the night sky from horizon to horizon. We begin by looking halfway up the southern sky for Venus, then shift our gaze almost straight overhead to spot Vega, with Albireo and Altair shining high in the southern sky. As the night deepens, we move toward the eastern horizon to find the Salt and Pepper Cluster and Mars. Approaching dawn, the Andromeda Galaxy appears almost straight overhead, while Saturn sits halfway up the southern sky and Jupiter rises near the eastern horizon. We will also see the double cluster high in the northern sky, along with Algol and Merfak almost straight overhead. To close the tour, we will watch the moon being crossed by satellites. Look halfway up the southern sky to find Venus, a dazzling silver-white point that outshines every star. It is visible without any instrument and is near greatest elongation. In Los Angeles and New York, you have your last good chance to catch the planet before it sets around 8 in the evening, while London gets its final view at 8:40 in the evening. Venus appears in Olaf Stapledon's 1930 epic Last and First Men, where he envisions humanity reshaping the planet into a temperate, Earth-like world for distant descendants. In reality, the real Venus is a scorching, pressure-crushed inferno with surface temperatures near 465 degrees Celsius and an atmosphere 92 times that of Earth, far from the garden world Stapledon imagined. Almost straight overhead shines Vega, the bright blue-white star that anchors the summer triangle. It is the very bright star of summer nights. This star reaches its highest point for observers in Los Angeles, New York, and London around 9:15 in the evening, remaining above the horizon all night for everyone. In 1983, the IRIS satellite detected an excess of infrared radiation around Vega. This led to the discovery of a dust disk surrounding the star, one of the first direct pieces of evidence for planet-forming material around other stars. High in the southern sky, find Albireo at the foot of the Northern Cross in Cygnus. While visible to the naked eye as a golden yellow star, a small telescope splits it into a gold and a blue star. This star culminates at its greatest altitude for viewers in Los Angeles, New York, and London around 10:05 in the evening. The system keeps surprising astronomers. In 2022, a study reported yet another hidden member, named Albireo adding to the little family of stars packed into this single glinting point of light. High in the southern sky, locate Altair, the low corner of the summer triangle flanked by two fainter helper stars. This star reaches its highest point for observers in Los Angeles, New York, and London around 10:25 in the evening. In ancient Chinese mythology, Altair represents Niulang, the cowherd, eternally separated from his lover Xinu, the weaver girl, represented by Vega, by the celestial river, Milky Way. This celestial love story inspired the Qixi festival, celebrated on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month, where lovers exchange gifts and pray for the separated star lovers to reunite, making Altair central to one of Asia's oldest romantic traditions. This night's deep sky object is the Salt and Pepper Cluster, the richest of the Auriga clusters. Look near the eastern horizon, just outside the pentagon of Auriga toward Gemini. In binoculars, it dissolves into grains of light. Los Angeles sees the cluster rise at 12:40 after midnight, New York at 12:13 after midnight, and London at 10:58 in the evening. Victorian observers described it as a field strewn with sparkling gold dust, and the modern nickname keeps that idea alive with cheaper seasoning. Rising from the eastern horizon near the eastern horizon is Mars, an orange-red point in Gemini. The planet rises at 2:04 in the morning in Los Angeles, at 1:48 in the morning in New York, and at 1:09 in the morning in London. In Arthur C. Clarke's 1979 novel The Fountains of Paradise, the engineer Vannevar Morgan builds a space elevator not on Earth, but on Mars, stretching from the planet's surface to its moon Deimos, a feat made possible because the Martian gravity is low enough to allow the structure to be built with materials available at the time. While the real Mars has a moon named Deimos, it is a tiny, irregularly shaped asteroid far too small and distant to serve as a practical anchor for the kind of orbital tower Clarke imagined. We now turn to the crossings of Phobos and Deimos in front of Mars. Phobos makes its first crossing of the apparent disk of Mars, lasting 51 minutes. This transit occurs between 7:31 in the morning and 8:22 in the morning in Los Angeles, between 10:31 in the morning and 11:22 in the morning in New York, and between 3:31 in the afternoon and 4:22 in the afternoon in London, with Mars standing above the horizon in each of these locations. The next Phobos crossing of the apparent disk of Mars takes 51 minutes. This event happens between 3:11 in the afternoon and 4:02 in the afternoon in Los Angeles, where Mars is above the horizon, while in New York and London Mars is below the horizon. Deimos makes its first crossing of the apparent disk of Mars, lasting 46 minutes. This transit occurs between 3:22 in the morning and 4:08 in the morning in London, where Mars is above the horizon, while in Los Angeles and New York Mars is below the horizon. The third Phobos crossing of the apparent disk of Mars takes 51 minutes. This event happens between 1:50 in the morning and 2:41 in the morning in New York, and between 6:50 in the morning and 7:41 in the morning in London, with Mars standing above the horizon in both cities, while in Los Angeles Mars is below the horizon. This night's deep sky object is the Andromeda Galaxy, the farthest thing the naked eye can see. Hop from the corner of the Great Square of Pegasus along two stars to find a faint oval smudge almost straight overhead. The galaxy is up for all of them in Los Angeles, New York, and London, reaching its highest point around 3:20 in the morning. For decades, the Milky Way's collision with the Andromeda Galaxy was taught as a certainty within about 4.5 billion years. In 2025, simulations using Hubble and Gaia data revised the odds sharply. Over the next 5 billion years, there is only about a 2% chance of a crash, and any eventual merger would more likely happen 7 to 8 billion years from now. In catalogs, it is listed as M31. Look halfway up the southern sky for Saturn, a steady, unblinking golden point in Pisces. It is fainter than Jupiter, but its calm yellow glow gives it away. At around 3:30 in the morning, the planet culminates for viewers in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Saturn was known to the ancient Romans as the god of agriculture and time, a deity whose name likely stems from the Latin word for sowing, reflecting the planet's slow, deliberate march across the sky that marked the seasons of the harvest. Long before telescopes revealed its rings, cultures across the world watched this wandering star with a mix of reverence and fear. The Babylonians called it Ninurta, a god of war and healing, while the Chinese associated it with the element of earth, seeing its yellowish glow as a symbol of stability and the center of the cosmos. The slowest of the naked eye planets, Saturn's year-long journey through the zodiac made it a natural clock for ancient farmers, yet its dim, steady light also earned it a reputation as a bringer of melancholy and restriction in medieval astrology, a far cry from the golden age of abundance the Romans once celebrated in its honor. Rising from the eastern horizon near the eastern horizon is Jupiter, a bright point in Cancer. The planet rises in Los Angeles and New York together around 4:35 in the morning, while London sees it at 4:04 in the morning. Jupiter is a gas giant made almost entirely of hydrogen and helium, and it is sometimes called a failed star because it would have needed roughly 80 times more mass to ignite as a sun of its own. High in the northern sky, find the double cluster, a binocular showpiece packed with young blue-white stars. Look for a hazy patch between Perseus and the W of Cassiopeia along the line from Cassiopeia to Perseus. The cluster remains above the horizon all night for Los Angeles, New York, and London, reaching its highest point around 4:55 in the morning. If you ever chase the Perseid meteor shower, point your eyes toward the double cluster. The twin clouds of stars sit almost exactly at the shower's radiant, so the meteors seem to burst out from that glowing pair. That makes the clusters a natural guide for meteor hunters, letting you spot the peak of the display with a simple star-hopping cue. Almost straight overhead is Algol, the winking demon star of Perseus. Watch it below the W of Cassiopeia over a few nights, and it visibly dims and brightens. The cluster is highest for Los Angeles and New York at 5:40 in the morning, while London sees it at 5:25 in the morning, staying above the horizon all night. Algol earned ominous names across cultures. Hebrew tradition called it Rosh HaSatan, Satan's head, while in Chinese it is Alingwu, the fifth star of the mausoleum, asterism linked to tombs and the dead. Almost straight overhead is Merfak, one of the 50 brightest stars of the whole night sky. Follow the W of Cassiopeia, extended toward Perseus to the brightest point of Perseus. This star is highest for Los Angeles and New York around 5:50 in the morning, while London sees it at 5:25 in the morning, remaining above the horizon all night. The name Merfak comes from the Arabic expression al-Merfak ath-Thureya, meaning the elbow of the Pleiades. Interestingly, this name relates to the star's position relative to the neighboring Pleiades cluster, not to the mythology of Perseus itself. Tonight, 41 satellites cross the moon's disk, with 30 of those tracks passing close to towns and settlements, and 6 tracks making up the selected near-town subset. Tiangong Space Station begins its ground path east of Guru at 6:09 in the evening and ends over the open Pacific at 3:33 in the morning. For an observer standing on the narrow path, the crossing of the disk takes only about 1 second. The second of the night, Tiangong Space Station begins its ground path north of San Juan Bautista at 6:51 in the evening and ends over the open Indian Ocean at 4:16 in the morning. The third of the night, the same satellite crosses again. Tiangong Space Station begins its ground path northwest of Lafayette at 7:14 in the evening and ends west of Nunjiang at 2:38 in the morning. The fourth of the night, the same satellite crosses again. Tiangong Space Station begins its ground path over the open Atlantic at 7:46 in the evening and ends west of Erdenet at 4:11 in the morning. The fifth of the night, International Space Station begins its ground path northeast of Franceville at 10:15 in the evening and ends north of Pavlodar at 2:31 in the morning. The sixth of the night, Hubble Space Telescope begins its ground path over the open Atlantic at 10:24 in the evening and ends west of Haifa at 4:42 in the morning. Subscribe for your next nightly sky guide and wish you clear skies.